Good afternoon. I'm Dan with Four Winds Ancestral Skills. Today I'll be covering how to make charred material like this. It's perfect for starting a fire. Got a lot to do, so let's get started. Alright, real quick, what is charred material? It's material that has been superheated and essentially carbonized without getting oxygen. So it hasn't actually been able to burn, it's just kind of been baked if you want to look at it like that. I have some examples right here. Char cloth. This used to be very commonly used. You essentially take a material like an old cotton t-shirt, something like that. It has to be natural fibers, like say 100% cotton. You can't have polyester or something like that because that just melts. But you can take something like that, char it, and it makes an excellent fire starter. You hit it with a spark and it'll essentially cause it to start smoldering, and it will slowly expand. You can take that, put it in your tinder bundle, what have you, and get the actual fire started. Another material that's commonly used is rotten wood. You want to take the wood off a rotten branch or tree. You want it kind of spongy, but you don't want it too rotten where it just disintegrates and falls apart. You almost want it kind of like the consistency of a sponge. If it's a little wet, it's not really a big deal. When you put it in there, you'll heat it up and it'll dry out. Now, the means of doing that, heating these up without exposing them to oxygen, you can bury them under a fire. The easiest way, though, is if you have some kind of can. If you have a metal water bottle, an old can like this, a common one is an Altoids can. You can take something like this, make sure it's not airtight. You want something with just a little bit of essentially a pressure relief hole. One note, if you use like a soda can, a really thin walled can like that, they will actually melt on a fire, so you really want to avoid those. Put the material in there and cover it. When you put this on the fire, it will smoke some. When it gets done smoking, then the material is done, essentially, so you can watch it and kind of get an idea when it's done. When this is on the fire and hot, it is good to leave it until the fire burns down and this cools off, because what can happen is this is on there, it gets done smoking, you pull it right off, you open it up, and there's a good chance that this material in here will catch fire. Then it'll just catch on fire and start burning, and you'll lose your material. The char material, especially char cloth, was used a lot in old days to start a fire before they had lighters, matches, all that sort of thing. It's really quick and fairly reliable. So I'll briefly touch on flint and steel. Make things like this out there. They're called fire steels, metal matches, ferro rods. These are often mistaken for a flint and steel. When you strike it, this is a fairly small one, and you can see how much sparks you get off, with every strike. It's a much different beast, if you will, than an actual flint and steel. If you want to practice the flint and steel method, you can use just an old file and a hard rock, like a piece of flint, chert, something along those lines. But this is an actual flint and steel method that was used 200 years ago. And when you strike this, you get some sparks off, but they are very small compared to the ferro rod. So you got to make the most of that. Ferro rod, you can get away with burning a lot of different material with catching it on fire. With the flint and steel, you're dealing with just a few little sparks at a time, and you need something that will catch and make the most out of each of those sparks. That's where charred material like char cloth comes in. You can actually catch one of those small sparks and get the fire going. There are some plants that will, especially when they're dry, ground up, they will catch a spark, but it is very time consuming and difficult to get them to get to that point. In this one, I'm going to focus on just making the char cloth and then catching it on fire just using a simple flint and steel. Now for flint and steel, like I said here, this is just an old file I had. You can use a file, they make special little strikers that are kind of curved around and you can strike. Any kind of carbon steel. So if you have a carbon steel knife, you can use that to try to make a spark. If you have a stainless steel, it ain't gonna work. It needs to be carbon steel. All right, we're gonna make some charred material. For this, I'll be using some rotten wood and some actual cloth. This is an old t-shirt, 100% cotton, so this will work to char. What I like to do is fold it like so. That way it will char essentially in little sheets, so you can pull them apart and be able to catch a spark a little bit easier. If you just take it and wad it up and shove it in the can, you pull it out and it doesn't really fold out very well. It kind of crumbles a little bit and falls apart, and it's a little bit more difficult to get a spark off of. So I like to personally fold them kind of like this. Then also some rotten wood, like I mentioned. This is just some rotten wood I found off a rotten tree over here. You want it kind of spongy, but also you don't want it falling apart. Now what you want to do, take this, put it in the fire, put a rock on top of it, and just let it sit there and heat up. Okay, now that the fire's cooled off a bit, we can pull that off. And here we have our charred material ready to go. This is what I was talking about with the charred material, how it kind of breaks if you fold it. So, but that's why it's good to kind of fold it or cut little sections or something. That way you can pull these apart and have little squares that are ready to catch a spark. A little bit easier than if you have just a wadded up piece of cloth. Alright, you can kind of see some of the sparks coming off this thing now. It does throw a few sparks, and we want to catch those on something like this. This is our charred rotten wood. And you can see this end here isn't charred. It didn't quite char down to here. So we want to focus the sparks on this area here that's the charred part. There you go. One of those sparks hits it just right, you can get an ember going. Now it's a little tricky, and you sometimes got to sit there and work with it for a while, especially some of the charred wood is a little temperamental. You especially want to keep it from getting wet, because this stuff will absorb water, and if it gets wet, it's pretty much worthless. Well, there you have it. That's how you make charred material and use it with a flint and steel. Anyway, this video was made in response to a question I had. Somebody wanted me to cover char cloth and kind of tell them about it and how to use it. So if you have any questions like that, anything that you would like me to cover in video format, feel free to either put it in the comments section below, or you can email me fourwindsancestral@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out our website, fourwindsancestralskills.com, and our Facebook page and group that we have. and links to all that can be found in the About section below. Anyway, I'm Dan with Four Winds Ancestral Skills, reminding you to get out there and make history. Take care.